Okay, starting up. Just give this a minute for everyone to join the webinar. I can see the attendee list is growing. Hello and welcome everyone to this LCR webinar on EB-5 Direct. We are going to be talking about the EB-5 Direct program and how to evaluate a project. As you know, there's been a lot of questions about the EB-5 program lately, with a lot of changes in legislation, a lot of changes in the regulation in the courts. And at LCR, we strive to educate our clients and work with our prospects and try to answer questions with regular webinars like this one. And so today we're going to dive into the EB-5 Direct program. I am happy and thrilled to have with me Christian Triantaphyllis. He's a longtime partner of LCR. We've done a lot of EB-5 regional center work together. He's also quite experienced in the EB-5 Direct program, and he's with Jackson Walker. Christian, would you like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Jackson Walker?
Sure. Thank you, John. Yes, I appreciate being part of this webinar. I've been working together with LCR for a number of years, and we have a number of mutual clients in the EB-5 space. So again, pleasure being here this morning with you. I am an immigration attorney and a partner at Jackson Walker. I am a specialist in EB-5 matters. Jackson Walker is a full service law firm with over 400 attorneys, and I run the business immigration practice out of our Houston office. I've been extensively working in EB-5 over the last decade, working with a number of families from all around the world to go through the EB-5 immigration process. And I work with businesses and projects on getting compliant with EB-5 matters as well. So well-versed in the EB-5 space, and look forward to speaking on direct EB-5 with you all.
Thank you, Christian. So today we're going to do some quick introductions, as we're doing now. Then we're going to talk about the EB-5 Direct program and a little bit about how it's different than the regional center program that most people are very familiar with. We'll look at EB-5 Direct projects versus regional center projects, and close with how we can evaluate an EB-5 project. We will take questions at the end. We also, if you have questions, feel free to use the Q&A button in your Zoom panel, and we can answer those as we go along and at the end. Alternatively, there is a chat, but again, if you could use the Q&A button, that would be the easiest way for us to handle that. We are recording this session, and we will share it with everyone who's registered at the end. We'll also be sharing this presentation. There's quite a lot of content in here, so don't feel you need to scribble down notes. We will be sharing the actual presentation with you all afterwards via email. A quick second for people who aren't as familiar with LCR. We are a private investment and advisory services firm. We support families interested in global opportunities. By that, we mean people that have made the decision that they're looking globally, whether to live or to invest or to purchase property. We have teams from San Francisco to Singapore, with large teams in India, Brazil, and in the Gulf states in Dubai, and over 850 clients, although we do work with people from all over the world, from over 30 countries. And the three lines of business that we manage, we're best known for the immigration programs, the EB-5 program for immigrating to the US, as well as the Portuguese Golden Visa for people who are interested in European residency. We also have a line of business around providing loans to foreign investors who have difficulty with the US banking program system when they first arrive. Not having credit in the US can be difficult, and so we've worked on ways to provide loans and mortgages to people who are coming from overseas. And then last, we have a wealth team, and the wealth team is a registered investment advisor, SEC registered, and also has a number of products in alternative investments. These are private equity investments in real estate or venture, are two areas that we're working in currently. The reason we do all of this is because we believe that global markets, particularly the US, can really transform the lives of clients. We see families, multi-generation, parents, children going to school in the US, opening doors, having opportunities, and literally changing their life by deciding to go global. And we work hard to be a trusted partner, to be an advisor, and to take our clients' best interests at heart as they work through what's obviously a significant decision with a lot of complexity. And it's important to have good partners when you make choices like that. I also need to make a quick disclaimer. We obviously are involved with securities, and this marketing presentation does not constitute the offer to sell securities. Any such offer will be made pursuant to the definitive offering documents. And you need to be an accredited investor in the US if you're a US person residing in the US or in the market that you reside in. We have a simple activation questionnaire where we can determine that, in fact, you are certifying that you're an accredited investor, and then we can share with you extensive details if you're interested. I also have to say that none of the information that myself or Christian will say can be constituted as legal advice. I think the people on this webinar understand that when you enter into a client-attorney relationship, then you can receive advice, legal advice. Obviously, if you don't have an immigration attorney, I can recommend Christian wholeheartedly, and we'll share his contact details if you want to reach out to him in order to get advice about your specific case. So the EB-5 Immigrant Investors Visa. Let's start. I know that we've got a broad base of people who are attending today, and some of you will be very familiar with the EB-5 program, and some of it you will be a bit newer. So we're going to start from the top, but quickly dive into the details, particularly of the EB-5 Direct program. The first thing we need to say about the EB-5 program, of course, it is extremely well defined. By that, we mean it was set up in 1990. It's been running for the 30 years, and it's been renewed multiple times. Now, let's just take a second and say that the program, EB-5, actually is it's codified in the immigration statutes, meaning it's a permanent part of the immigration law in the United States, managed by the Department of Homeland Security with a dedicated agency in the USCIS, or the US Citizenship and Immigration Services Agency. And travel documents and passports are issued by the Department of State. Because the EB-5 program involves an investment, those investments are also managed by the federal agency, the Security and Exchange Commission, which manages all of Wall Street and all investments in the United States. Christian, can you just take a second and talk about the difference between the EB-5 Direct program, which is the base program, and the Regional Center program?
Sure, I'd love to. So you are correct indeed. The EB-5 program is a petition-based program that needs to be filed with USCIS. And the EB-5 program was set up in 1990 as part of the Immigration Act. And at that time, we had EB-5, which we call the direct EB-5 program, where an investor would be investing directly into a business and hiring 10 full-time employees. A few years later, 1992, in effect into 1993, Congress also set up the EB-5 Regional Center program, calling it a pilot program or sort of a test or temporary program that they wanted to see how it went for a while before making further determinations. Well, that EB-5 Regional Center program, when it was added on to EB-5, has gone very well, but as a result of it being a pilot program, it needs to be reauthorized from time to time before its sunset dates. And as we know, it is currently sunsetted, and we right now just have the direct EB-5 program. The big differences there, which we'll get into more in this presentation, I'm sure, is that when the Regional Center program was implemented a few years later, the idea was to allow for indirect job creation rather than just the direct job creation. And as a result, developers were able to raise larger amounts of money in one shot from a number of investors to finance a larger project. So that was sort of how this all unfolded. But we do know that direct EB-5, it is indeed a permanent program. It's not part of the expiration and reauthorization. That's all the talk in EB-5. And so it continues on today.
Exactly. And it's one of the benefits that we'll talk about in a second. In terms of EB-5 in general, the employment-based fifth category, it's obviously a very clear way to achieve permanent residency. People do look at their other choices, their other visa choices. People can transfer to the US with a corporate position on an L1 visa. That's a temporary visa. They can invest in opening a new business in the US or a franchise through an E2. Again, those are temporary visas that give working rights and the right to live in the US, but not a green card or permanent residency. The EB-5 program does offer a clear path to permanent residency. The timing is generally 24 to 36 months. It's difficult to say that right now because our clients who have come in through the regional center program with the labs are in a delay, and there's been processing challenges in the USCIS in terms of delays of getting conditional green cards or having those conditions removed at the end of the program. But once a petition has been accepted, the approval rates are very high, in the 90s plus, for people actually making it all the way through the process and receiving a permanent green card. The investment types we talked about, and we'll talk about more. It's either direct or through a regional center. It does extend to the family, dependents under 21, so spouse and dependents at time of filing. And the investment level is currently $500,000 for a project that's in a targeted economic area. The regional center program and the direct program, this is exactly what Christian was just speaking to. The 90+% of people who have used the EB-5 program to date have come through the regional center program. And that's because it is tied to much larger projects. The concept of investing into a fund, which is then loaned to a large real estate or hospitality project, means it's a very passive investment for the client. And there's a lot of security in that, in the size of the development and the background of the developers. The EB-5 direct program is different in that it was originally set up for people that were starting businesses in the US. So it's seen almost more as an active investment, although it doesn't need to be active. You don't need to be in management of the direct business. But because it's tied, as Christian said originally, to direct hires, to the W-2 full-time positions in that business, it tends to work best with smaller businesses, a lot of retail and franchise locations, restaurants, and other businesses where the ownership on the part of the investor can be directly linked to the jobs created. Would you add anything there, Christian, in terms of the differences between the two? We're going to talk about this for a bit more as well.
Sure. I would say that one of the, another reason why the regional center program outpaced the direct program in popularity for years is that when the direct program was traditionally being used for startup businesses and individuals coming in to try to run their own business, the EB-5 program does not allow somebody to just enter the United States based on filing an I-526 petition, which is the first petition of the process. You actually need to wait for that I-526 petition to get approved. You need to then go to the U.S. Embassy to pick up your EB-5 visa and enter the U.S. as a green card holder, the conditional green card holder, and that's your status to run your business. So the idea was, how can I, the issue was, how can I start running my business and create the jobs if I've got to wait for all of that to happen on the front end before I have access to the United States? Meanwhile, the EB-5 Regional Center program allowed for investors, or at least was better suited at the time for investors to invest with a group that would manage their money, manage the business, create the jobs. And all that would happen while the investor was waiting abroad to enter the United States. Well, we've seen an evolution within the program where direct is also being structured properly so to allow for the same type of flexibility and sort of turnkey solution for investors. So I thought I'd just add that piece to it.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And there I can see questions coming in about minimum requirements and can it in fact be for a large business like the regional center? And we will dive into that and answer those questions. But
Sure.
When you look out in the marketplace currently, you see that most of the projects that are being offered only allow for 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 investors. And this
Right.
again is because if you imagine bringing 10 investors into a business, you're then required to have 100% confidence that you can have 100 employees. And plus you would like to see a job cushion there. So perhaps it's 150 or 200 full-time W-2 employees. And there aren't that many businesses that support that level of investment, that level of employment. So you see a number of types of companies that are seeking EB-5 direct investment currently. A number of them are early stage ventures, such as Breezelight. I mean, this is one that we talked to. Christian's actually working with them. They're currently out raising. You also see single location restaurants. These might be large destination restaurants like Senora Martinez in Miami or Villa Azur in Las Vegas. Again, independent restaurants or small chains. And then, of course, you see franchise restaurants. Sonic has been using EB-5, both through the regional center and direct, since I think 2003. I can't remember the exact date there, 2013. At any rate, actively using it as a source of funding to help their expansion or remodeling of stores. And we're talking currently with Denny's about using EB-5 direct investment for their new stores. A franchise chain like Denny's that's been running since the 60s has a huge history of opening new locations. It has a set of franchisees with a deep knowledge of how you go about opening a location and assurance. They don't invest the $2 million to open a new location with the expectation that it would close in 1 or 2 or 5 years. These are 10-year, 20-year plans. And that's why we find the franchisees really interesting. Christian, when you've worked with the early stage ventures, for example, with Breezelight, do you end up only having the limited set of investors? I think that one is it 5 investors that they're looking for currently?
Yeah, no, it's a few more than that. It's just barely in the double digits, but that's because it is scalable. The way that you look at a direct project, going into it is it going to be sort of a single location, single investor setup? Is one location able to support more than one investor because it has enough jobs? Maybe it has 25, 35 jobs it's going to create. So here it can expand as more investors show interest and come into and invest in the project, because it is scalable in that sense. They can set up, you have to look at the kind of industry that the project's in. What are those sort of job creating industries from a direct job point of view, and they're into manufacturing, and so they can buy equipment and set up a new location and support another EB-5 investor as demand drives that. But they do have a fairly modest initial sort of goal of I believe it's 12 investors, and they certainly would have the job creation to support that, and it fits their business plan in terms of the initial growth that they plan on doing.
So to answer the question, can it be used for large businesses? I mean, when we look at large multi-use high-rise developments, we see 20, 30, 40 investors. Are you
Right.
seeing any businesses at that scale that are using EB-5 Direct?
Well, I don't, I've not seen any sort of pooled, pooled is kind of a buzzword in this space, but I'll say I have not seen a project that's taking on 20 to 40 investors in one single development under the direct program, because that would then, if you're going out and finding 40 investors, that would require 400 direct jobs. But I will say that I've seen a few hotel deals in the space, and large hotel deals can support a number of direct employees, and that's where I've seen the most number of investors being raised in one single project. The other sort of larger number of investor offerings are those in which they can scale up depending on the amount of demand. One investor is enough to support one location. Excellent. That investor has the job creation to support their EB-5 immigration process. If they go out and find 30 other interested investors and they have locations to support them, then they can continue growing and growing, and each location will support the job creation. That's another way you can fit a number of investors into one offering. But for the most part, it's these lower number of investors per offering or per location.
Right, and we'll dive into how you evaluate a direct project, and even talk about where you need to think about the legal documents that assure that you'll have you get attributed the jobs that are created. So your point there about multiple locations, for example, in the franchise world, that your jobs are tied to one location. If it's a large hotel and they've said they're going to keep their cleaning staff and their house staff and their restaurant staff all as direct employees, and thus they're guaranteeing the number, then you get into a conversation about which investors get which jobs first and things like that. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So what's the same between the programs? Again, going back to the base education, they are both written to the same statute. So they're both managed by the same federal agencies. The investment levels are the same. These are determined by the USCIS through their regulations and are published for the program overall. If legislation were to change and demand and state that there should be a different investment level, it would apply to both programs. The concept of TEA definition is also the same across both programs. Eligibility and requirements, which we'll talk to in a minute, are also the same across both programs. The clear source of funds, demonstrating where the investment capital has come from, even if it's a gift, where that gift capital came from. The I-526 template is also the same, and the processing times are the same. Although on that one, Christian, let me ask you, there's been some talk that because the regional center has lapsed, that direct petitions are moving through USCIS more quickly. Are you seeing that in your experience with your clients?
I can say that I am now. I'm seeing some action that's a little faster on the I-5, on the direct EB-5 petitions, and here's what I mean by that. When the regional center program lapsed on July 1st of this year, I still had I-526 petitions pending that were filed in 2019. I also at that time had I-5 direct EB-5 petitions that had been filed in 2019 that were also still processing with USCIS. Since that time, most, if not all, of my direct EB-5 petitions that were filed in 2019 are now being adjudicated, if not already adjudicated, by USCIS. So they're already been approved, or USCIS has come back and asked questions through a request for evidence, typically about the status of the project. And so that shows to me that because the USCIS resources are not spread across regional center and direct petitions right now, they are able to focus on those direct petitions that were filed in 2019. Now, once they get through the files in 2019, we have to think about what will 2020 really mean in terms of how many USCIS has to go through. There really weren't that many I-526 petitions filed across the board, when you even including regional centers. So I'm fairly certain there weren't many direct I-526s filed in 2020 either. So I would imagine USCIS being able to get through the 2020 filings as well. Now, when regional center comes back, of course, resources will be spread across again, the two different programs. So that's something to keep in mind going forward.
And I know that we can do whole webinars on processing times and processing the way that USCIS handles them. But again, they should be first in, first out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I guess the short answer of the short way to answer your question is yes. I've seen USCIS now adjudicate I-526 petitions under the direct program that were filed under 2 years ago. So
that's encouraging.
Yeah, it's encouraging.
And of course, the legislation proposals that have been working their way through Congress actually look to address the processing time issue, because
yes,
everyone recognizes how frustrating it is, and it's a real pain point for our clients. So we're making quite a lot of noise about that.
Well, not to go off too far a tangent on processing times, but as someone who's seen this for a while, I mean, when I was first involved, I was getting I-526s approved in 3 to 6 months pretty regularly. Then USCIS got bogged down with a number of filings, and we started to see processing times ballooning over 2 to 3 years. USCIS addressed that. They staffed up, got them trained up, and we started to see regularly processing petitions of 10 to 20 months or so. Well, that sort of fell apart again in late 2019 for a variety of reasons, and now we've got this current lapse. So I'm hoping USCIS can right the ship in a very quick way, as they did in the past, to get those processing times back in order.
Exactly. Something to think that to ask for Christmas, if you celebrate Christmas. Okay, so what's the difference between the two programs? Obviously, the EB-5 direct program, as we said, is a permanent part of the immigration code. That means it's not tied to the reauthorizations and the sunset dates and the political back and forth that occurs inside Congress. The investment type, as we've said, it's a direct equity investment. This means that all of the concepts that we learn about the regional center, with investors coming together and pooling their investment and then loaning it typically to a new commercial enterprise, don't apply. It tends to be you are taking an equity investment in an LLC, and as an owner, you are. That's why it feels more active, although you can be a passive owner in an LLC. And with that investment, you're eligible to use the jobs created for your immigration process. We often say that the complexity of a direct investment is less complex than a regional center pooled one. Christian, would you like to talk to that for a second when you put your, the securities hat on?
Well, sure. I mean, I think here you're looking at a difference of investors investing directly into the operating business itself, and the number of investors that you're taking on per business or offering. So what I mean by that is, under the pooled regional center model, you've got a number of investors that you're making an offering to, who are investing into sort of a fund, if you will, a special purpose vehicle that is then going to provide the financing to the project itself. And then under that structure, we've customarily seen a full-blown private placement memorandum, subscription agreement for those investors investing into that special purpose vehicle. Under the direct model, when it's sort of this one location, one business, one investor, a PPM may not be necessary. You certainly want the investor to be aware of the risks involved, and the investor to understand how to join as an equity investor into that business, and that can be addressed through a subscription agreement and an operating agreement. It's really a matter of preference, and really needs to be determined on a case-by-case basis, but that's sort of the simplest way to address that question.
Yeah, so the obviously in the case of a regional center investment, there has to be a PPM because you're offering effectively a security to quite a lot of people that are then creating that limited partnership and investing the money. In the case of an EB-5 direct, it can be as simple as a single person buying equity in a single LLC. You know, in the US, creating an LLC is incredibly easy, which has been done to encourage entrepreneurship. And so it can be a simpler process. I think the big one that we should take a second to talk about is job creation. And we've touched on this already, but this is one of the biggest differences between the two programs, and one that gets a lot of attention, and it should. You know, and it also impacts the project documentation you see when you're evaluating these projects. In the case of the EB-5 direct program, as we've said, it's W-2 employees. That means that the position is identified in a business plan, and the position isn't a part-time, it isn't a contractor, which in the US is a 1099 position. It's W-2, which means that they're a full-time employee, typically with benefits and other protections. And the individual might change, but it's the position that matters. So if, using the restaurant example, you have a head chef, you might have over 2 or 3 years, 3 head chefs. The person has changed, but the position has stayed the same. It may be that you need 2 head chefs, one for the day shift and one for the night shift. That would be 2 positions, just to run that out. And in the regional center program, indirect positions are included. So if you're building a high-rise hotel, you're able to include all of the people who work for the construction firms. Or if you're running the hotel, you can include contracted teams of people that are cleaning rooms or working the front desk. And that is a real critical difference between the two, as we've said. And it also means that in the documentation, in one case, it's the business plan that's the most critical piece of documentation to ensure that your project will be a success. In the case of the regional center, you also get these econometric reports that model with RIMS 2 and different methodologies the number of jobs that a given project will create. Carrying on, we were asked through the Q&A about the requirements. You know, the good news here is that all of the people that have been looking at EB-5, and we understand it's a big decision, so people often study it before they move forward. The requirements are the same. You know, the minimum capital investment, the background checks, the stated source of funds, and the idea that the investment is at risk. That's also the same across the two programs. Are there any requirements we're missing here, Christian, that are different between the two?
Not really. I would just I do want to emphasize the thought of the back, to the job creation, which could be on this slide, is, what entity is employing the employees. And what I mean by that is, under the direct program, we know that the equity, the entity that the individual takes equity in needs to be the same entity that employs the employees, or otherwise it needs to be a wholly owned subsidiary that employs the employees. Under the regional center model, we know that it doesn't matter if it's the actual entity that the investor takes equity in is the one creating the jobs. It oftentimes sends money over to the developer, which is the job creating entity. And those jobs, which are not just indirect jobs through an economic model, but they're also indirect in the sense that they're not actually employed by the entity that the investor invests in, and the investor still gets credit for those jobs. So when I assess direct investment opportunities from an immigration law perspective, one of the first things I look to is what entity is in fact employing the employees, and I want it to be the same entity that the investor is getting equity in.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely critical, because it's when the conditions are removed at the end of the process, they go back and they look. And so, at, were the jobs created? Were they all W-2? Were they verifiably American citizens that were hired? And so making sure that that corporate structure is right is critical. We had one question here, Christian, just to jump in, about the source of funds. Is it possible to take a loan for the project? For example, could I put equity of 100,000 and then take a loan for the other 400,000?
Yes, you can. Maybe you have cash of 100,000 that you can invest directly into the project, and then you take a loan and you use the proceeds of that loan to invest the remaining 400,000. Yes, you can do that. You cannot use, but you should not use the equity ownership of the that you have in the business to secure that loan. But you can certainly use loan proceeds to make your EB-5 investment.
Yep. And also gifts from family members also are applicable. Again, the source of funds of, now I know for a gift, they have to be traceable. For a loan, does that source of fund also have to be traced back?
It does if it's coming, if it's a personal loan, if it's from a friend or family member, we need to do the same type of source of funds analysis that we would do if that individual is making a gift to the EB-5 investor. If it's a loan from a bank, not a lot to do there. We've just got to indicate what that bank is and what those loan documents look like. And 9 times out of 10, USCIS is not going to pick out whether that bank was able to acquire those dollars in a lawful way. They pretty much understand that it's a reputable institution.
Got it. Makes sense. So the timeline, again, as we've said, is the same across the two. And we've talked to the fact that with the regional center lapse, there is some movement on the direct side, which is encouraging. Again, the timing here on these slides is a difficult one to truly speak to. And we always, when we present this slide, say that we're all at the mercy, if you like, of the investor processing office, immigrant processing office, or the USCIS. But we do a lot of work both on analyzing the current processing rates and publishing information about that. So if you look at lcrcapital.com, you can learn quite a lot of that, or you can, of course, reach out to us and we'd be happy to explain this process in a lot more detail. So how do you evaluate a good project from a bad project? This slide that we have in front of us now is one that we use actually when we're evaluating regional center projects. It's, which we have to remember, this is effectively the same program. This same set of due diligence exists whether it's direct or regional center. Compliant documentation, how strong is the background of the team that's putting together the project documentation in terms of their understanding of the US government regulations, how a project is presented, and what will ensure that your personal application as tied to that project will be successful. The job creation. Obviously, this is critical and something that gets a ton of attention. We've already talked to it. What is the model? Is it a model that's been presented to the USCIS before and shown to work? Is there good confidence that enough jobs with enough of a cushion will be created to ensure your immigration benefit? And of course, on the financial structure, this is just classic good business. Do you believe the project is sound, that the people that are engaging in it or undertaking it have the right background? Is the capital stack one that makes sense and gives you confidence that the project will go from business plan and idea all the way through to completion with job creation right there in the middle? When we turn to a direct project, there's a few other things to look at. And so we've pulled this together as a way to sort of be able to, for us to talk to some of the questions I see here on the EB-5 Direct program. So as we said earlier, the business plan is really, really important. You are investing into a business, and you have to expect to be investing into that business for 5 and conceivably 7 years. So is the longevity there? Is there, as Christian just mentioned, 100% ownership between the commercial, the LLC or the corporate vehicle that's accepting the capital and the one that's creating the jobs? In some cases, this is one entity. That's quite clear. In other cases, there's effectively a holding company and a job creating enterprise, and that needs to be 100% owned. On the job creation side, we've talked to this, but one thing that often is missed, because these are direct jobs, they all need to be E-Verify. This is a US government tool that confirms that an individual who's working has submitted a W-2 is in fact a US citizen. There are sectors where people have been able to receive jobs as a W-2 employee and not actually be a US citizen, at which point, for example, the agriculture sector can see that, and others. In that scenario, when the jobs are presented, in order to demonstrate that they've been created, they check the actual Social Security numbers placed. And if in fact they're not verified, as a petitioner and as the business, you have to go back and demonstrate that you have enough verifiable jobs. Christian, have you seen that before?
Yes, they're very curious about making sure that those are qualified U.S. workers. So I think it's something that the operating business needs to be sort of vigilant about throughout the process, not just within the 3 months when it's time to put together the I-829 filing package, because you don't want to run into those kinds of issues down the road. So that's a key point you're bringing up. Also, what's interesting about a direct project, I've talked to a number of individuals over the years who think about how to put together direct deals or fund their own direct business for EB-5. And the job creation, unlike the regional center program, when you're not really looking at people sitting at desks or even hard hats on a construction site, it's all just modeled through that economic study. The direct program, you've really got to explain the job creation in the business plan, and you need to convince USCIS that these jobs are necessary. You're not just producing extra jobs for the sake of your EB-5 immigration process. So that's that third-party verifiable evidence, market studies that indicate, yes, this type of job needs this many this type of business needs this many employees. And then on the back end at the I-829 stage, it's time to prove it up that you did hire those employees through E-Verify, I-9s, W-2s, and that's when you want to make sure that those people that you hired are qualified U.S. workers.
Yeah, so there's a great point there, and this gets into the owner rights. People have tried to do EB-5 direct, buying, say, a property and saying, I'm going to have 10 people work on my property. But
right.
If you must have an amazing property if it's demonstrated that house needs 10 people to work within it. And
yeah, expenditures the expenditures of the EB-5 money being 90% quote unquote working capital, meaning it's just financing the payroll, would not be a recommended way to go about doing a direct EB-5 project.
And so people are asking, well, will my funds be returned? Again, the EB-5 program across all the projects are based on the capital must be at risk, meaning that you are putting it at risk to create jobs and support a venture in the US. But all of the business plans, and definitely ones that we work on, we work hard to minimize that risk. And so, yes, the business plan and the intention and what's written into the agreements includes capital return. In fact, in the case of an EB-5 direct program, that, how that capital return will occur and what are the exits is something to be discussed in the operating agreement. Also, your rights as an owner are in the operating agreement. The protection of the assets, the regular reporting of the company. Now, that last one, of course, is in every operating agreement for an LLC, and some required by the SEC. But it's one to dive into, because you want to know that during that period when you have your conditional green card, those jobs are being created, they're being documented, the employees are being verified, and you're confident that when you, as Christian said, put together your package for the 829 to see the conditions removed from your green card, that you go straight through because your documentation is bulletproof. Sound about right?
Yes, it does.
Okay, let me just click a couple of these questions done that we've answered. Let me see. So now we're going to open up. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I do have a bunch of questions that I've queued up. So I will turn to my panel here. So excuse me for looking away, and let's make sure that we've answered these questions as well. So one here is, under the direct program as an EB-5 investor, as an equity holder, can the project owner ask for more funds over and above 500,000 during the project and the running business? If so, how to protect the investor from this future unforeseen demands? So this in an operating agreement is called a capital call. And Christian, do you want to talk to that? Can capital calls be restricted? So as an equity owner in the new commercial enterprise, if they need more capital, you can say, I'm sorry, I'm not available to provide more capital to the firm.
Well, I mean, you named it. You said exactly what it is, and it's going to be all described in the operating agreement. And as a member to that company, you will be subject to whatever the terms are written into that operating agreement. So that's something you certainly want to know going into investing with whichever group you decide to. So from an EB-5 immigration law perspective, you invest your initial $500,000. You want to document that from with the source of funds that are required. And you might think, well, that's all that I'm required to demonstrate was coming from a lawful source. If there is an additional capital call, that technically should not, that's not part of the $500,000, and that may not be part of the lawful source of funds analysis. Well, one of the things that I've seen USCIS harken back on is in the regulations, they say, well, we want to see that all money invested into the new commercial enterprise, which is the operating business itself, is coming from a lawful source. So I can see scenarios where if a capital call is requested and investors do make those additional investments, there's a possibility, if USCIS knows about the capital call, that they could say, show me that that additional investment came from a lawful source as well. It's just a matter of whether I think mostly whether USCIS would actually know about that capital call later on down the road or not. But
of course, any investment would have to be subject to review for money laundering regulations. So,
right.
But clearly the source of funds analysis, which is coming from that same space, knowing that the funds invested in the U.S. are lawfully acquired, that's a higher standard. I think there's a lot more documentation expected for that review.
Sure.
Yep. Okay, another one here. Oh, sorry, let me just click that one. Done. So, one of our viewers has mentioned that they're active in real estate and they'd like to stick in the real estate industry. And they're wondering, are there EB-5 direct investments instead of restaurants that are more based in the real estate industry? I think we can talk to that. We had another question about the franchises. What other types of franchises we do see in EB-5 direct outside of restaurants? So on the real estate side, obviously there are franchises that do property management. I don't know if that can move from an E2 to an EB-5. That might be complicated to demonstrate that you're hiring 10 full-time people to manage property. That would require a lot of property. Have you seen current EB-5 direct projects that are more based in real estate? You mentioned a hotel project.
Yeah, I mean, a real estate development that results in an operating business as well, with that is relying on having employees on site, is the type of real estate project that can better suit EB-5 typically, as compared to, you know, building a high rise or multifamily housing. Um,
Yeah, the
when I
challenge
think,
there is that if the business is the one doing the construction, it has to be a huge project if it's going to run for the 5 years and have 10 people working on it. So
yeah,
you end up
and those are
evaluating the hotel, right,
right.
which is hiring the 10 people. So if you love real estate, you're just as, you may not have the experience in restaurants, that's the operating business that hires the jobs. And in the case of the real estate, it's the hotel that produces the jobs.
Because I might be stating the obvious, but it's just that construction jobs are not typically W-2 workers. These are contractors that are coming in, and those don't qualify under the direct EB-5 program. So that's why you're not seeing a lot of real estate development involved with direct EB-5. You're seeing these other industries that rely on W-2 direct employees.
Yep.
You also have to think about, under just a real estate management concept, are you really able to spend the full $500,000 on eligible expenditures? So sure, you can do that if you're spending it on hard construction costs, if that's part of your business plan. But if your plan is really just to come in and manage or oversee the construction of various developments, you have to really think about how you're spending your money towards job creation, other than propping up payroll.
Because as we've said, if you're literally just propping up payroll, then that won't make it through the review.
Yeah, yes, I was going to say, why are these jobs really necessary? This isn't typically the type of business that requires this type of job creation.
Yep. So what are the approval statistics for direct versus the RC program in today's environment? This is interesting. There's quite a lot of data on approval statistics for regional center investments. I don't know off the top of my head approval on direct. I would imagine they're actually lower than the regional center because of the number of people who get into projects that hit the challenge of the direct employment.
Yeah, anecdotally, I mean, the problem cases that come to me are those who have gotten themselves in a situation with their direct EB-5, or where I've needed to sort of buy some time on the direct EB-5 side, because it's either not going to work out in the long run, and in the interim set them up through the regional center program so they can go ahead and get credit for the job creation and stay in the United States, in the sense that, with the comfort or understanding that they're going to be able to convert their conditional green card to the non-conditional green card. And that's typically where an entrepreneur is trying to do everything themselves, set up a new business, run it, create the 10 jobs in the long run, and it's just not panning out the way they thought it would be. Now, under the sort of the new era of direct EB-5, where you're seeing more U.S. partners looking to partner up with foreign investors to help them run the business and create the jobs, that can better resemble the successful model that's worked under the regional center program. So those statistics may change, or they might start to better resemble that type of managed direct, might better resemble the regional center model and success rates that we've seen over the years.
Yep. Yeah. And again, this is we are in the history of the EB-5 program, so much attention from 2008-9, when it really grabbed and became a viable source of funding for real estate development and drove the large number of people applying and the awareness of it in different markets, including the markets that were very active in India and in Brazil and in the Gulf. During that time, direct was a much smaller percentage, and we were saying 5%, and often tied to family businesses, or as Christian was saying, entrepreneurs. And so they ran into more difficulties. Now, with all of the regional centers looking and structuring direct programs with the rigor that you would expect from a company like LCR or our peers in the industry, we should see the approval rates go up. Once the minimum investment amount or other requirements are achieved, is it possible to convert a business? So this is a question about E2 to EB-5, an
Okay.
E2 visa to an EB-5 direct program. This actually warrants a full conversation. But if someone were to invest a small business at 200,000 and then it grew to be $1 million business, could I apply for EB-5 direct? Is there a quick answer to that one, Christian?
The quick answer is you can get credit for the investment that you made in the E2 business for your EB-5 petition. You can get credit for that investment, and it can go towards your EB-5 petition as well. But your business growing into $1 million business is not going to do that. Is not going to cut it. It's literally a matter of making a personal investment that exceeds $1 million or 500K if that business is in a TEA. And what I'm saying is if you spent $200,000 setting up your E2 and then you invest another $300,000 into that very same business and it's in a target employment area, now you've met the EB-5 qualifying investment amount. And if that business is going to go on and create 10 jobs overall, you could consider also moving forward with an EB-5 under that same investment or under that same business.
I mean, the E2 to EB-5 is a complex piece, and there's been full webinars on it. I've actually participated in some. It's worth a separate conversation, and inevitably, there's a lot of personal detail in there in terms of the business you're starting, type of employment, and really, you probably should engage an attorney if you haven't already, and go through that conversation for your business specifically. And it's the, so Christian, you answered this question, which was about how do I look after a business personally, till we get the green card, how can we come and analyze and make a business plan? Yeah, I think with the types of investments that we're looking at and our peers are looking at, we're finding ways to make it more of a passive investment. So just as when you're evaluating a regional center project, you can come to the US on a tourist visa or a business visa, a business visitor's visa, review the site, meet the management, talk with the regional center, build your confidence, and make your investment. That's the same approach we're looking at in the direct program, where you can understand and do your due diligence on a visit, on a short-term visit, because you're not expected to be actively building the business as a manager. In a loan arrangement, repayment terms are more clear. Under direct with an equity investment, what are some of the examples of ways previous directive investors have exited their investment? So this one is about exit, Christian, and obviously It's something that's near and dear to all of our clients with good reason, and near and dear to us because we want to make sure our clients receive their capital back. So some of the ways you've seen exit, obviously refinancing is always one. Have you seen any other creative ways that direct investments have set up the repayment of the capital?
Well, I mean, I think one of the most straightforward is just available cash to pay out an investor, perhaps through operating business. I mean, profits coming from the operating business. Refinancing is also a popular way or a common way to do that. Sometimes directs are set up to where the EB-5 investor is in a position ahead of the other common equity owners of that business, so that they feel like they're in better position to get their money back after paying off the debt. And so, you might consider being in that position over the common equity. Oftentimes, though, that preferred might not have the same return as the common equity, but it really just depends on your what kind of position you want to be in the capital stack.
Yeah, so we're at the top of the hour here, and we do still have a few more questions. I'm going to take one more here, and let's just address this one. I just noticed that it concerns someone who's in the digital media space, and I spent a lot of years in digital media, so I thought I would try to dive in on this one. Assuming the regional center program doesn't come back in the next 3 months, would a mid-sized media business related to a potential applicant in digital media expansion mode in India and international aspirations without 100% commitment, or rather any hard commitment of time and energy, be well positioned or rightly positioned to apply on the DCP route? So I think answering that question and with some experience in digital agencies and digital media businesses, it's true that digital agencies and media business hire quite a lot of people, and they hire full-time people. But I think that reading between the lines of the question, you need to have a clear business plan on your expansion into the US, meaning that you have existing clients, you have leases and the infrastructure to actually hire in the US, and then it could work. I haven't seen any agencies use direct EB-5 capital. I mean, Christian, have you seen any kind of those pure service, professional services business using EB-5 capital?
I haven't seen that type of business use EB-5 capital, but it's not to say that they couldn't. It's just a matter of making sure that you show why these expenditures are needed, how the money is going to be spent on developing the business, and that it's going to result in hiring these 10 full-time employees that are considered to be direct employees.
Yeah,
we're not limiting. I have seen some software businesses set up, but that's primarily where they're if they're developing software, they're also servicing clients, and they're having people on the ground doing that, so they can show the additional job creation. They're also having a brick and mortar office with equipment and other items necessary for servicing their clients. So you have to really think through about how digital all of this is versus needing some boots on the ground and actual expenditures beyond just marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I actually immigrated to the UK on the equivalent of an E2 visa, and we set up a digital agency, and after 18 months, we had hired 100 people. But it was an exceptional time. It was a digital agency in kind of the 1999, 2000, 2001. And I think the challenge, as Christian said, is one, agency businesses expand and contract rapidly based on client demand. So that can make the investment a bit more risky. And then the other piece is, currently with all of us embracing, digital technology and working through Zooms and things, teams are really dispersed, and you need to prove that the jobs are created in the US with US citizens. So if you're doing a lot of development back in India, obviously none of that growth would be applicable. I think we're going to have to wrap there. We're 5 minutes over. We completely appreciate all of the attention. We appreciate the questions. Again, if we didn't get to your question, please reach out to us. My name's John Baker. I'm available. You can find my contact information online, and it's in the reminders and emails you've had about this webinar. Christian also is visible and present in a number of places online if you'd like to engage with Christian or ask him questions directly. Christian, thank you very, very much. As always, fantastic answers and demonstrating real knowledge.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate being a part of it, and very well done. So thanks so much.
And everyone, I hope you have a great evening or a great day, depending on where you are. And we will be sending the presentation and video recording so you can review pieces. And again, reach out to us if you have additional questions. Thank you very much.